challenge. So I'll talk about other subjects today to try and make it a little bit lighter on the back of our last session, and also knowing that we are I'm the person standing between you and ending the day, so I will try and keep this pacey. There's a lot to cover here, because when we look at the gap between purpose and impact, it's so important to think about ways that you can close that and the increasing risks from a reputation point of view of not doing so. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. My name is Jeremy Cohen. I'm a senior partner at a company called Blurred. Blurred is based in London, but we have a global client base. I'm based in Paris and speaking to you today from Barcelona. So quite global. So let's move on to the next slide once I figure out how to do so. Let me tell you a little bit about Blurred. We're a strategic communications consultancy at heart, but we set out to achieve more than just communications. What we do is help companies be better so that they can have a better story to tell. Because if you don't do that, then the communications part is easy, or at least it's easier. So what we try and do is blur the lines between communication, sustainability, management consultancy, with the aim of delivering real impact for our clients, for people, and for the planet. That's our purpose. And we're talking about closing the gap between purpose and action today. So you should measure me on whether or not you feel that we are living up to that purpose. And it's something which we've been doing a decent job of, so hence sharing with you some of our awards. And the reason that I share those awards is not to trumpet them, but it's because we've been able to back those up with the arguments that we make. We work with companies to help create positive impact and tell the world about it. And I'll talk later on about why that's important. But our argument is that to tell a story of positive impact, you have to first disclose your negative impact. In other words, before you can credibly talk about the good you do, you first have to disclose the harm that you do and what action you're taking to mitigate that harm. We believe that communications can be a forcing function for business transformation. So helping clients to have a positive impact on the world and telling the story of that impact to their audiences. And that's the argument behind the research and methodology that we've launched that I'm going to talk about today, the gap between purpose and impact, which is embodied in this idea, which we call ESGP, a simple idea, impact coming from integrating ESG and purpose. Reducing negative impacts through ESG strategy, optimizing positive impacts through purpose. And what you then get is a powerful impact narrative of how you as an organization are making a difference in the world. And this, creating impact and communicating clearly how you do it, using ESG and purpose accurately, effectively, sincerely, with commitment and evidence, this is becoming more urgent and more scrutinized. And with that greater amount of scrutiny comes more risk. But the worst possible thing to do would be run in fear of all this regulation and scrutiny and risk. That's not really an option. What we need to do is to remember to point all the point of the regulation the point of all this isn't about the regulation at all. It is about being better. There are lawmakers around the world who are trying to force companies to produce amazing detailed reports, but not to try and make a difference, to actually quantify what they're doing, but not pressuring them to do better. And we believe that motivation is actually what matters. So do you really want to make that difference? Do you want to be better? Do you want to reduce negatives for people and planet and maximize positives? That's ESG and purpose, which obviously we're looking to make work together. So let me just illustrate that briefly. This simple chart is an easy way of thinking about it. Companies should ask themselves, you should ask yourselves, where is your company on this chart? Are you here? If you're doing neither ESG nor purpose, if you're simply causing damage to the environment and society and making no attempt to do good, well, you're just a negative impact on people and planet. That's the end of the story. If you're doing ESG well and minimizing the damage to environment and society from your operations, but without a purpose to guide and amplify those efforts, the best you'll do is achieve a sort of impact net zero. Reducing negative impacts, okay, which is a good thing, but you're not creating any long-term value for people or the planet. If you're not doing ESG, but you're claiming to be doing good, you're claiming to be cleaning up, claiming to living by a purpose, which I think is where a lot of organizations are. But then at best, what you're doing is using CSR type initiatives to try and offset the negative impacts from the business. Without the rigor of ESG, the negative impacts will still be there. They won't be disclosed. There'll be no plan to reduce them. And your supposed purpose is really just a smokescreen. This is green territory. Up here is where it obviously used to be. reduce negative impacts through ESG strategy, and creating positive impacts by acting according to best practice purpose, a net gain for people and planet. For companies that get that, this ESG and purpose, or ESG strategy, is just good business strategy. ESG isn't siloed data reporting exercise, and purpose is not a brand exercise. They're brought together and together into a strategy for impact. They are a strategy for profiting by solving problems and not causing them. So, of course, you would expect to hear a plea like that from an agency like ours. So I would say don't take our word for it, but listen to what investors say. Last year, the SAID Business School at the University of Oxford conducted some major research that acted as a spark for our thinking about this last September. We're not talking about a YouGov survey here. This was interviews with 49 asset managers who have $19 trillion under management, 33 multinational companies with an average revenues of $45 billion. And what the researchers wanted to know was how in major companies is purpose connected to broader board strategy. And these are direct quotes from that research. Institutional investors don't see purpose being practiced in the companies that they invest in. Companies are not taking it seriously. Communications about it is either shallow or flimsy. It lacks substance. And there are no mechanisms for accountability. Again, direct quotes. This is about the most important quotes, though. There is a disconnect between companies and investors, and bridging it requires that boards convert the relevance of purpose into ESG. What outcomes and impacts are targeted and measured? And when we talk about an impact gap, this is very much what we mean. This disconnect, this credibility divide that happens when ESG and the P are siloed and not integrated. And for us, the conclusion is clear. Investors see ESG and purpose as explicitly connected components of the same strategic agenda, and they want governance of that agenda to occur at board level. They want purpose to have substance and to be informed by material, environmental, and social factors. So hopefully that will make sense. Let me talk very lightly about the research that we did to make sure that we are on the same page and can take some lessons from it. So what we wanted to do was to find a way to measure in a meaningful way how integrated public companies' ESG and purpose is, or whether or not there is a big disconnect. Spoiler alert, in most organizations there is. And what does that mean? So we worked for 4 months, and the data specialists at insig.ai worked with us, and we spoke to investors and analysts to develop a methodology for exploring this ESG and purpose impact gap. What we did then was analyze the entire FTSE 100 data set, so FTSE 100 companies in the UK. Looking at that data set, we'll go international eventually, but we started there. And first of all, exploring the relationship between ESG versus purpose communications within the last financial year. And we counted tens of thousands of substantive ESG and purpose disclosures across 100 companies reporting. So we're talking about annual reports, sustainability reports, and other materials. And we looked at statutory reports because this is where companies are held to account, where they have to disclose data and actions. Reports are an article of record. They can't be altered or changed like you can do on a website. And the first thing we found that there is a clear relationship between the volume of published ESG disclosures and how much companies talk about purpose. This is a graph of how much companies communicate and publish ESG on the bottom axis and purpose on the left axis. And we found that companies are clustered together when volumes of ESG and purpose communication are low and thin out as numbers of disclosure go up. The size of the bubble is market cap. So most smaller companies, the smaller bubbles, cluster towards the bottom left, with larger market cap companies clearly investing in putting a huge amount of ESG and purpose information out there. But the sectors that are nominally leading might not be those who you'd expect. And this is a bit of a theme. Industries with significant and obvious environmental challenges, like mining and energy, they're publishing a lot more information regarding both ESG and purpose. That's not just because those industries are highly regulated. If that were the case, you'd expect to see pharma and financial services up there too. But you can see, well, you might not be able to see because it's small, but those are sectors that are actually lagging behind. And so we're quite a long way from best practice purpose, from putting purpose and ESG strategy together. Few companies in the FTSE 100 are meaningfully connecting ESG and purpose in their highest level communication. And part of this is because, as the investor research showed, we're a long way from being best practice when it comes to purpose. Less than a quarter of FTSE 100 companies reference broader well-being objectives around people, planet, environment, and society in their purpose statement. And when that's where there is an effective purpose should be all about in the first place. It should be about people, planet, environment, and society. And yet less than half of FTSE 100 companies are demonstrating any meaningful progress towards their purpose and towards what we would consider best practice. And one of the first things we did is evaluate every FTSE 100 company's business's stated purpose. And each of the circles here, you don't have to worry about the detail, but each of the circles here represents another company. And we placed each company on a spectrum from no purpose at all. And remarkably, 4 FTSE 100 public companies still fall into the category of not having a purpose, to best practice, which we consider to be full alignment with a standard PAS 808. That framework's new, so you might not have heard about it, but it's something to look into. But what's more interesting is that the cluster of the companies on the left, the majority of FTSE 100 businesses, have a stated purpose that demonstrates no alignment with best practice at all. And the nature of those businesses is interesting. Nearly all tech and finance companies fall into that category, as well as the majority of consumer FMCG brands, which might come as a surprise. I'm going to move on for time. And this is just our scoring tool. So we developed this methodology, which allows us to see 3 core criteria: clarity of the ESG narrative, ESG in practice, and how ESG was being governed, evidence of accountability and measurement. Total score is 10, which would show a strong link. And obviously, the further you go down, the weaker that link becomes. And we've got case studies in the full report we published, but we wanted to show at least one example of what this looks like in practice. And it's Unilever, because Unilever has obviously been the poster child for sustainability and purpose for a long time. And I should say up front, I've worked on Unilever at different agencies in the past and participated in the development of the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan. But we probably all agree Unilever is a sustainability leader synonymous with purpose and sustainability in many people's minds. And yet what we see is that Unilever today is attracting scathing comments from investors who argue that the notion each of its household brands needs to have a purpose suggests that they've lost the plot. All of this criticism misses the point. Unilever's fallen into a common trap. It's used purpose as a kind of marketing tactic, disconnected from the ESG issues that form the basis of the company's strategy. So all of Unilever's 72 brands, major brands, they've got sub-brands as well, have a supposed purpose. And I think it's worth asking a question: does mayonnaise or Vaseline or toothpaste need to have a purpose? Who knows? I don't think that's the question that matters. For certain, these brands have done some brilliant creative campaigns focusing on really important social and environmental causes. And in the end, that has to be a good thing. But what we also know is that Unilever itself has a purpose, a good one, a purpose to make sustainable living commonplace. But curiously, there's rarely talk about it. It barely gets a mention in their communication. Unilever doesn't really communicate an integrated impact narrative at all. ESG is its sustainability strategy, and purpose is its brand marketing strategy. They appear to be quite separate when in fact they should be deeply connected. So if Unilever wants to stop getting heat from investors, it needs to, and other stakeholders, it needs to properly explain to them why purpose matters. Not that it's about helping its brands perform better, although that's undoubtedly true, but that the North Star for the entire business is their purpose. It's why the Sustainable Living Plan was developed in the first place and how it will measure itself in terms of outcomes and impact. Because the overall score for Unilever, without getting into detail here, is 5.5 out of 10, which for the sustainability leader or one of the poster childs of sustainability, that is potentially surprising. I'm going to skip the factors behind the score for time because I want to talk about the risks of getting this wrong over the next 10 minutes. The scrutiny and risk on the ESG side is immense and it's growing. There's an avalanche of legislation that's about to hit all companies who've got a footprint in the EU, including British and American companies. And some of this, in particular the CSRD and the CSDD, is like nothing we've seen before. The amount of data required, the amount of disclosure is going through the roof, and many companies are panicking about it. And the scrutiny on the doing good side, the claims to be creating positive impact, is also ramping up. So here's just a small selection of headlines from major companies who've been hammered over greenwashing in recent months. These are companies that have talked about the good they do and done that misleadingly. The risk of greenwashing rises significantly when purpose is used as a convenient label for claiming some positive impact on the world, or as a sustainability badge or a brand campaign. Greenwashing or purpose washing is now itself a serious material risk, and that risk is more than regulatory, it's legal. This is US Commodity Futures Trading Commissioner, Christy Romero, just a few months ago, saying as a 20-year law enforcement official, she takes the position that greenwashing is fraud. And it is fraud. It's lying to consumers and lying to stakeholders. But greenwashing is only partly about regulation. It's also about pursuing authentic purpose. It's what it should be about, the connection between purpose and impact, allowing you to talk about that impact in a way which isn't greenwashing. Because purpose is not a tagline, it's a commitment that you have to live up to. I've taken 4 brands here, but there could be hundreds more to talk about. A few examples that I've just taken some of their purpose and value statements from their website. So Johnson & Johnson saying, we believe our first responsibility is to the patients, doctors and nurses, to mothers and fathers, and all others who use our products. That's a beautiful statement of intent. This is a company that's faced over 100,000 lawsuits, has recently had a $9 billion fine related to cancerogens in talcum powder, and failed in an attempt to spin off that part of the business and place it into bankruptcy to avoid that punishment. So criticism and beyond that, criticisms for failing to properly disclose health risks associated with other products. Volkswagen, a very well-known company, a very well-known scandal, Dieselgate, found to have cheated on emission tests for diesel vehicles. And I think sometimes it's easy for us to skim over Dieselgate, you know, and it's that, yeah, they lied on some tests, but okay, they paid and got beyond it. But what they say is we can be counted on. We do what we say, and we say what we do, candidly, honestly. We keep our promises. And what we found out in research, scientific validated research, is that an estimated 45,000 life years have been lost, and $39 billion have been lost in economic value through the physical and through the health impacts of that scandal, not to mention the environmental costs. They've paid $35 billion in settlement costs so far. Facebook or Meta, we have the responsibility to promote the best of what people can do together by keeping people safe and preventing harm. Meanwhile, Meta have had whistleblowers and have been accused of amplifying polarization, misinformation, and privacy violations. Uber, we believe in a world where movement should be accessible so you can move and earn safely. Meanwhile, multiple controversies related to its workplace culture and practices that seem to contradict those values. They've had already $150 billion in data breach fines alone. So look, I'm not attacking these companies. There's a lot of things that they do in those companies that are good. I've worked on projects with some of these companies before, so there's a lot of good in them. But when they put these purpose statements out there, and then you put that up against the reality of some of the issues which have come out, then you see that there is a gap there. So this is not simply about looking at that gap in reporting between impact and purpose. It's about looking up to that purpose statement and saying, are these organizations delivering what they're promising society? There is an opportunity here. I'm sure you will have heard a lot of this over the last couple of days. Marketing professionals are ambitious on sustainability. 90% say corporate sustainability strategies need to be more ambitious. 94% say they need to act more bravely and experiment to drive transformative change. And 35% acknowledging that there's a knowledge gap on sustainability topics among marketing professionals. And that's one of the things that I've seen most profoundly throughout my career, is that lack of deep understanding of both the operational side of a business, how that links to sustainability, and then how you can pull that through to communications and marketing. And you need to have that level of understanding to do this authentically. Consumers are more skeptical, but they also want brands to be more vocal. 63% believe that brands only get involved with sustainability for commercial other than ethical reasons. Okay, that's an issue. But 63% say they would like brands to be more vocal about their sustainability plans, obviously with the caveat that those sustainability plans need to be authentic, they should be close to the core activities of the business, and that they should be able to demonstrate demonstrable impact at scale. So some final thoughts to leave you with. Go beyond compliance. Lead with purpose, yes, but that purpose needs to lead to action and impact. Build your knowledge and your capabilities so that you can operate authentically in this space. And act as an internal convener. If you've got that knowledge of the operational side, the communications and marketing strategy, and how to build those, bring those together, noting that there is a way of there's a necessity to manage the regulatory piece of this. If you are able to do that within the organizations that you work within, that gives you the authority to act as the internal convener, particularly bringing together the comms, the marketing, and the legal function, who are the key stakeholders when it comes to making sure that you close that gap between what you say and what you do. Of course, because there's reporting involved in this, bringing in the finance function as part of that is critical as well. But it's ultimately going to be the lawyers who are trying to push and dictate what gets out through the door. And the answer they're often going to be giving is nothing. So if you want to be in control of what you can as an organization put out there in a credible, risk mitigated way, demonstrating impact that you as an organization in order to respond to consumer expectations and demands, the best thing you can do is take control of that conversation. And to take that control of that conversation, you need to build up the knowledge and experience in sustainability and the operation of your business so that you can be credible in that space. So look, I've whipped through a lot over the last 25 minutes or so. I hope what you've seen is that we've got some pretty strong positionings as an organization in terms of what we believe our clients and partners and relationships need to be focusing on. The research that I've shared with you backs that up, that right now there is a clear gap between what we say in our purpose and what we do, and what we report through our statutory reporting. There is also a gap in many organizations between what you say is your purpose and what you're actually doing as an organization, and how those things run counter, and where the risk of that is, both from a regulatory point of view when we talk about greenwashing, but also from a reputational point of view when we say we're an organization that's out in the world to do good, but the reality is it's demonstrable that you're not delivering through on that promise. So treat purpose with authenticity, treat it with credibility, treat it seriously, but above all, make sure that you've got the knowledge and experience so that you can guide that conversation rather than being guided by what your organization allows you to put out from a communications and marketing point of view. So I'm going to end it there nicely on time. Thanks for the opportunity of speaking to you today, and wishing you a lovely cocktail end of your day if you're in that part of the world, and if you're somewhere else, then hopefully you've got something out of this, and we'll apply it in the day ahead and then get to your cocktail later on tonight. Thank you very much.